going to hear from one of the country's best known and most important NGOs, that is to say, the Red Cross, about the way in which geospatial thinking is informing not simply the way they respond to disasters, the way that we most often have the Red Cross in the news, but the way in which they think about them in advance, in which they prepare, thinking about where the risks are, how the resources for resiliency can be amassed, the ways in which the United States can better prepare itself to deal with the inevitable and to the inevitable toll of natural and other kind of disasters that occur. We're going to hear about this from Harvey Johnson, who for the past 2.5 years has been Senior Vice President for Disaster Cycle Services, a very interesting term in itself from the American Red Cross. And his mission there is to help Americans prepare for, respond to, and recover from nationwide disasters. Before this role, Harvey Johnson has had other positions at the Red Cross. Interestingly, also, he's a retired Vice Admiral from the U.S. Coast Guard, and he is a former Deputy Administrator of FEMA. So he has important both national security and federal government experience. And he's been, in his current role, a key contact person for the Red Cross in dealing with federal, state, and local government officials, plus NGOs and other businesses as well. So he understands the human, the technological, and the organizational landscape in which disaster response takes place. He's a graduate of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy and has a MS from the Naval Postgraduate School and a Master of Science and Management from MIT Sloan. Please join me in welcoming our next speaker, who is Harvey Johnson.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What a great opportunity, isn't it, to come today and to listen to these stories about how we're using GIS in our various occupations, our services, and what we provide to the country, whether it's in commercial or government or private sector. It's Albert Einstein made a comment that once the mind expands by a new idea, it never contracts to its original size. And this is the kind of conference, we call it mind expanded because it really is. I've already jotted down a number of ideas I want to take back, and how can those play in the Red Cross? And I hope that some of the ideas that we're dealing with in the Red Cross might be helpful to you as well. First, about the American Red Cross, I don't know how much you know about us, but our mission is to alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by two things: the power of our volunteers and the generosity of our donors. And both of those come into play in the GIS system that I'll talk to you about. Our system is called RC View. It's Red Cross Visual Interactive Event Wizard. And if you had to say that long thing very often, you'd have to really appreciate the acronym of RC View. So our story is much like yours. And RC View, it's the Red Cross first, our first time into technology for an event management system and also a data analytics decision support system. So it sounds a lot like what you're building. Its base is going to be a visualization, and it'll be layers, various layers we either get from others, some from you, some from NGA, some from the insurance industry, and then we make some of our own. Those give us a sense of what is the geography of a disaster, what's the layout of our organization, where are the shelters, where are the other facilities, where's the extent of damage? Damage isn't the same across the entire disaster. It varies by different locations. Where are the most intense areas of damage? How does that affect us in the mission? On top of that, we want to arm all of our volunteers to be data collectors. We have mobile apps. We add that onto the data layers we have. It gives us a common situational awareness. We think we all want that. That's what we expect to have in a disaster, but you'd be surprised how long it's been since we don't have that kind of a common operational picture or shared situational awareness. Based on all that data, we take analytics, we look at our trends, and we create data-driven decisions, which has us, for the first time, the Red Cross driving out of the front of the car, not looking in the rearview mirror, drawn by what we saw yesterday, because now we have data that we can project ahead, know where we should be in a disaster, and how can we get there. It's been different than the way that we typically do business. So a little bit about the Red Cross. The Red Cross is an NGO, which means that we survive on donations. We don't receive federal funds. That affects the way that we develop new processes. The Red Cross is new to RC View, new to GIS technology. Just 2.5 years ago, if I went into one of our operations centers, there was no map, sometimes not even a paper map. There were no monitors on the wall. There was no good connectivity into the building. We couldn't share information if we wanted to. And people operated by the seat of their pants, by the knowledge or experience, which made good decisions. It was like 100 miles of bumpy road. Without the data, there were no data-driven decisions. It was gut-driven decisions, which means you spend a lot more resources than you really should for disaster. If you spend more in response, you have a lot less to spend in recovery. And so it all affected the way that we provide support to our people. We're an organization that divides the country into 60 regions, and each of the regions are different. Some are haves and some are have-nots in technology. About 15 of those regions had some money from their past endeavors, and they could create some IT systems, and about 45 to 60 had virtually none. So it's pretty uneven. Not only did we not have technology at all the regions, but it didn't filter up to headquarters as well. And we're an organization that in my area of disaster response and recovery, about 2,500 paid staff members and about 60,000 volunteers. Volunteers come in various generational gaps, some with a flip phone, some with no phone, and some with iPhone 10 connectivity. It's a range of people that make up our workforce. And so as you can imagine, when we're trying to start number one in an event management system, it's a bit of a challenge. So how do we do that? We made three really good decisions. The first is we selected Esri as our partner. They weren't our contractor, they were our partner. So Ed Karubas and his team, they took an RFP that we wrote, which is a proposal with not a lot of background in GIS, and helped to create a vision for what could RCView be, what could it become. That vision was helpful for the second thing we did, which was go to donors. I mentioned the Red Cross has no federal funds, all of our funds are by donors. So for the very first time in the Red Cross, we took to the donors an IT system. And the first meeting was they have low expectations, tell them what it is, and somebody else that has the next slot in time. Except our 1-hour presentation became a 2.5-hour presentation because we excited by the vision, we excited the imagination of donors. And thanks to Walmart and Target, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, a couple others, they donated millions of dollars that allowed us as an NGO with uneven income from one year to the next to stay consistent in building RCView. And the third thing we did is to have a small team of committed leaders, much like Brian Keenum, who if you were here yesterday, you saw Brian speak, you heard Brian speak. If you were in DC, you heard Brian speak as well. And so with a good vision, with supportive donors, and with a good committed team, we began 2.5 years ago down the road of building RCView. The other thing about the Red Cross is we operate in two colors of sky. Blue sky is what we do every day without a major disaster. In a blue sky, every region manages their own region to whatever they do in terms of response. It's home fires, it's small floods, it's right now wildfires in California and Texas that respond at the region level, and the blue sky business occurs all on its own and with one way of, at the local operation, leading those efforts. If you have Hurricane Harvey, Irma, and Maria, that all happened within about 2 weeks of each other last summer, those become national operations. National operations, there's no national force, you draw from the local. So the blue sky feeds to a gray sky environment. It's important to think about blue and gray sky because that's how we approach deploying RCView. So as we took our everyday, the work that we do, respond to fires, and we begin to develop apps of how do you do this in a GIS environment, we need to build a foundation first. So we looked at mapping. Mapping is a common foundation in GIS. Can we go to each of our 60 regions and can we teach them how to map first, build the basic map, and that became what we would layer on top of different applications. Out of 60 regions, we identified what is a baseline for a mapper. A mapper needs to be able to go to RCView, to be able to create a map, be able to add objects onto the map, to bring in different layers, transfer that map to a partner. So here's the 9 or 10 things you have to do baseline services and mapping. Out of 60 regions, 45 regions didn't meet our baseline. This is like 2 years ago. Now we've advanced, we've gone into each of those regions and taught people how to map. If you look at the lower left-hand corner, this is a map of home fires in the country. Every region now can develop a map. They've got a person who's an RCView advocate at every region. They develop maps about their mission. Here's a map of where we respond to home fires, a map where we have blood drives, a map where we teach different Red Cross courses, a map of lives saved as we've installed free home smoke alarms across the country. 444 lives saved now because of our installation of smoke alarms. We can show all of those on a map. Every region now can go to their local mayor or commissioner or even to the governor and say, hey, what's the Red Cross done for me lately? Let me show you what we've done now in a series of maps. A map picture says 1,000 words, and a series of maps we can describe what we've done in that community to help them understand the value of the Red Cross. All of that's come to us with RCView. And we're about ready to roll out different applications to the regions now to take the work they do every day and brings them to a GIS environment. In a gray sky environment, I've talked about major disaster like Hurricane Harvey, you know how massive that is. What is the geography of that disaster? What is the common operational picture of that disaster? Where's the situational awareness? How can we use that in our disaster response and recovery? First of all, when we know where the geography is and we break our organizations up, we can do that in a way that makes sense and everyone can see what the organizational structure looks like. Imagine you're a volunteer from Michigan, you go to Houston, and you don't even know where Houston and Dallas, where they are from each other. Now with a common picture, everyone in the organization has the same mental picture of what disaster looks like. It's amazing the power of a common picture to drive people to work towards common objectives. So when we look at that map, we can see where the major damage is. And if we go out and establish shelters, when we deploy emergency supplies, we know where to go now. It used to be we'd go to a neighborhood and go to a parking lot and open up the backs of our trucks and hand out shovels and comfort kits and things the community might need. Imagine how much stuff we passed out that wasn't needed and how much dollars that cost. We're able to save money now because now we drive that truck to the area of highest impact and serve just those people who need that equipment. And when those dollars are donated for the response, if you save dollars in response, it's there for recovery. You can help people more into the recovery phase of a disaster. When we look at damage assessment, we used to drive down a street literally at 5 miles an hour. 3 people in the car, one's driving 5 miles an hour straight down the street. Guy in the left-hand seat has a clipboard. You can still buy those at Staples, by the way, with paper, and they're marking down on the house the level of damage in this house along the left-hand side of the street. And the guy in the right-hand side seat is doing the same thing down the right side of the street. As they drive down the street generating all this paper, they drive back to the recovery office at the end of the evening. They try to ingest all that data entry error into a computer, and about the next day around 10 in the morning, you have yesterday's damage assessment. What do we do today? Using Survey 123, adapted for the Red Cross, branded called RC Collect, we drive down that street if we think we have to, because if we get an overhead imagery of a neighborhood that's totally flooded, we already know what's going on in that area. We don't have to go down every street anymore. And now with an RCView application with pull-down menus, we can take a look and put a ping inside that address, match the damage, and go to the next house. You can sit back at our DRO office in real time during the day like an election night tote board and ping, 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 watch these homes show up with the extent of damage. In real time during the day, you can redirect resources and people to send more assistance to those who have the most severe level of damage. It's made a huge difference in how we even send people to a disaster. It costs us about $1,600 to send every volunteer to a disaster. When we send hundreds less because of using RCView and data collection, then that hundreds of dollars less adds up again into saving donor dollars to commit to recovery part of operation, where those who are the most impacted need the dollars the most. Now we have them because we spent fewer dollars at the front end of the organization. It's a challenge to do version 1.0. On your iPhone today, if you're like me, you're slow at taking all the updates, and it's, I think, iOS 14.2. And it's difference between 14.2 and version 1.0. So there's a few challenges that we have in the Red Cross we deal with in rolling out version 1.0. First is technology adoption. I mentioned we've got a workforce of 60,000 volunteers. Volunteers can vote with their feet. Do I volunteer with the Red Cross or do I volunteer somewhere else? How do I take technology where it's not been before and bring volunteers to use this technology and want to use it? How do I make it simple enough for them where the barrier of use is pretty low? How can I convince them of the value of it? It really makes a difference. Yes, you did your job this way yesterday without technology. You're going to do it this way tomorrow with technology. Here's why it's better for you, but more importantly, here's why it's best for the client. If we can drive value to the client, every volunteer is driven to increase the value to the client. Technology adoption continues to be a challenge as we roll out different elements of RCView. Second is that how do we deploy RCView? In the Red Cross, we don't have 1,000 staff people. So when a disaster occurs, everything in that region focuses on the disaster. If you're in the middle of a rollout of a new piece of technology, and you all divert for a week or 2 weeks to respond to California fires, Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Irma, or Maria, then you've left that deployment over on the side. Now when you come back to it, what was it I learned 3 weeks ago? So we're learning how to pace a deployment of new technology in version 1.0 to make sure we're consistent. We've got very specific standards of passing, and you've passed the grade for your deployment. We have an idea about how to pace it, how to describe it, how to train for it, how to make it, again, be appealing. How do we roll out wave after wave across all regions in the Red Cross a new piece of technology? And the third thing, it's almost like I think all of us, when you watch Jack's slides, we're almost nibbling on each slide. There's a little bit of that slide we're working on, some more than others. And I really liked his last slide. It's about implementing GIS. And what it really points to is almost like the proverbial iceberg. We've focused on the top of the iceberg. That's the value of the application to the client, the process. Underneath it, though, what's the cost of really implementing this new technology where you had none before and you can't grow your staff? Now a staff that didn't have to support an application yesterday has to support an application now with level 1, 2, 3 support, program support, IT support, enhancements in the future. So we're learning more about, whoa, what does it take to really make this system work? And that's sort of below the waterline. And again, an organization like an NGO, that's a hard thing to scope out and make sure that we've got the resources now and next year and years from now to be able to support the continued growth and development of a system like RCView. But we're excited about what's coming our way. In a disaster, if you don't define yourself, you're defined by others. And in this world today, you're defined by social media and by the trolls of social media. So no matter how good a job we were doing in a disaster of responding to the needs of people impacted by the disaster, if you get a couple trolls that get on a roll about what you didn't do right, or even some news story that might not be accurate, then you're chasing the bad news story. So we're about to roll out this summer something called Partner Donor Public. And if you've been with Esri for a while, you know about story maps. Well, we're learning of the power of a story map. So we want to be able to, this summer, for the first time, roll out during the disaster a story map, updated a couple times a day or whatever we need to do, to tell the story of where is the Red Cross? What are we doing? Where can a person go to find a shelter? Where can they go to find food? Or where can they go to find support? If we can roll this story map out and tell our own story, we're defining what we're doing in this mission. We're defining what our success is in the disaster, not waiting to be defined for us. You would be amazed, again, the power of the volunteer, the generosity of donors. You'd be amazed how corporations stand up, many of you corporations here, and support the Red Cross during the disaster. Many want to provide services to the Red Cross. They want to provide an airplane to fly things down to Puerto Rico. They want to provide a 53-foot trailer full of supplies to go and support that shelter in Texas. And so with our donor app, we can put almost like a wedding registry. Here's the list of things we need in a disaster. And if you see this list and you want to help us out, then in one way, through an electronic system, we can begin to meet some of those needs by communicating better to our donors as to what we need for disaster, how they can help, and turn all of their interest into real dollar value contributions to a disaster's progress. And our partners are phenomenal. Our partners, I mentioned Walmart, Target, some others, they're looking at disaster. They want our information to help them do their job. So as you can imagine, if they have our situation awareness map, they can take our map, overlay on top of that where their stores are located. It helps them identify who their employees are, what can they do to help their employees in a disaster. When we show the extent of the damage, it tells them what quantity and what supplies to send to their stores, because this is what people are going to need. We've never been able to do that before. But with Partner, Donor, and Public, for the first time this coming summer, we're going to be able to tell our story, define ourselves to the public, be able to help our donors help us to be more efficient, more effective in a disaster, and we're going to help our partners to do the same. Some of our partners, NGOs, aren't like the Red Cross. They don't have the millions of dollars raised by donors to support a system like RCView. They depend on us. So we begin to share with our partners, our business partners, share our situation awareness map. They use it for their business and how they can help contribute in the disaster. For the Southern Baptist, for the Corps, for the Rebuilding America, for the hundreds of other NGO partners who come to us in response and recovery, we're going to share our system with them so that they too can plan. They too can see the extent of damage and where it's at. They can talk about their volunteers and talk to their donors about what they can do to partner with the Red Cross and how to respond more effectively to disaster. We created an idea called the RC View Academy. I talk about how do we take our volunteers and have them learn about RC View and begin to embrace it as their own. And it's through an RC View Academy. We had our first convening. We sent people to Redlands about 2 weeks ago with a group, and they're just excited at the chance to learn more about GIS and about insights and how they can take the techniques that Esri has and use it better to tell our story. In the upper right-hand box is Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, there are 78 municipalities. Almost all were impacted by Hurricane Maria, but some were more so than others. Our volunteers took a mobile app, our RC Collect. They went into each of the municipalities and asked questions like, where do you buy your food? Remember you heard stories about grocery store shelves being empty? Where were they empty and where did they have food on the shelter? Where are you getting your water? Did you know that people in Puerto Rico sometimes get the water from mountain streams that get polluted during disasters? Where are you staying tonight? Are you staying in a shelter? Are you staying back at home? We asked those basic questions every day going out into the community, and what came back is we got the answers. We put it on that map that we just lost, and what that map tells us is every municipality was impacted differently. Because we could see that, we could adjust our support services, and FEMA could do theirs, the Commonwealth could do theirs, because we provided this information to all of our partners. We could make sure we were most efficient and effective at meeting the needs of those that are impacted by the disaster. We couldn't do it with our RC View. The word transformation is overused in our society. Everything's transformative. I have to tell you, if you're in the Red Cross, if you're an NGO, if you're in the response and recovery business, RC View is transformational. It's not just paving cow paths. We don't automate what we do. We change what we're doing because of the power that we get from GIS. And so it's just been a remarkable program all on of its own. We're learning every day, and sessions like this are so valuable to walk away with lessons learned about how you face those similar challenges and how you address those. We were at lunch today with a group from Singapore, a very interesting group. And it was interesting to share stories with them about what they're doing with GIS and what we're doing, have them talk about story maps and things that really have been very effective for them that we now can take on and say, hey, we're just starting down that road. We're going to move a little bit faster with somebody as we gain, even there talking with them at lunch. And it's the same thing all day long about listening to these presentations and about working with our partners, drawing on those lessons, going to have to learn them all ourselves and make our response more effective, more efficient. Mission of the Red Cross: eliminate suffering in the face of disaster by the power of our volunteers and by the generosity of our donors. We're leveraging that generosity, and we're emboldening the power of our volunteers to use technology now to do a far better job of serving those that are impacted by disaster. So again, thank you very much.